Hello and welcome to another Revel Coach Conversation. I am Alison Nissen, co-founder of Revel Coach, along with my sister, Marcy Stoudt. We have been on our journey for 5 years, learning and speaking with other people about their journey and what they can teach us. We like to call it our private MBA program. Today, we are lucky to have Katie Montbriand with us. Katie, could you tell us a little bit about what's been on your mind lately?
Absolutely. So I know we'll get into this, but I've been thinking a lot about the concept of purpose this holiday season. Uh, Specifically, so I'll back up just a little bit because that was how my journey started, was looking for purpose and thinking about purpose and not feeling purpose at work, which I think is something that a lot of people experience, where you go to work and you bring all of this energy and heart and soul and all of yourself into what was for me a corporate career. And it just doesn't give you that satisfaction that you want to feel. So you go out looking for something else, right? You have to go searching for what this next thing might be. So that's been driving a lot of the work that I've been doing lately. It's been driving a book that I've been writing and all sorts of different things. So if you're game for it, I would love to talk about purpose today.
Katie, I am always game for a conversation like this. And it's so nice to meet you because I feel like the work you do is so important for so many people because as much as we know, as we get to the next stages of our lives, like we're in charge of our lives. So to lose yourself on purpose, it's like losing your North Star. So to me, there's nothing more important than this conversation. And I would love to jump in and ask you a little bit more about your work and how you get people to look at it differently.
Absolutely. Well, let me start with maybe sharing a little bit about my journey and how I got to where I am, and then we can weave that back into talking about purpose. So, my background, I had kind of the traditional go to college, be a consultant for a while, go back to school and get an MBA, go work for a big corporation. I followed this pretty clearly defined track for the first part of my career. And I ended up staying in this corporation for a very long time. I thought I would be there for a couple of years. I ended up staying for almost a decade. And the reason I stayed for so long was I got to do something new every couple of years. I could raise my hand and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Can I give it a try? There's this opportunity. Can I jump into it? Which, looking back, I now know means I'm a generalist, which is a great learning. And I found a wonderful community of generalists. If anyone is resonating with that statement, they're out there. You just have to go looking for them. But toward, kind of the end of this path through this corporation, I kept having this feeling of, I'm good at what I'm doing. I'm being rewarded. It's not like this is a problem. But I think there's something else out there. So I kept feeling this invisible pull. And I almost left a couple of times. I got close to the edge and kind of peeked over and said, is it the time? Is now the moment? And it wasn't. The first time, it was when my husband was leaving his corporate career to start a company. So I got close and I was like, what if we both jumped? Wouldn't that be cool? And then had a moment of, well, maybe it's not the best time to throw all of our stability out the window. Maybe he'll go start his company and I'll keep doing the thing I'm doing. And then the second time I got close was in 2020. I actually had this whole plan that I created on New Year's Eve. And I was going to leave my corporate career. I was going to get a coaching certificate. I was going to go on a sabbatical. I had all of these things listed out. And then in March, something changed my mind. When I realized not only could I not go to coaching school, which was supposed to start in early March 2020, again, maybe not the right time to throw all of the stability out the window. So I backed away from the precipice yet again. But that feeling never left. It was still kind of there, bumping around in my subconscious saying, hey, I think there's something more for you. But it's hard to walk away from something that's going well, right? If things are easy and you're doing pretty well and you're on this path that everybody looks at and says, you're doing well, on paper, this is all really good. why are you listening to this little voice in your head that's saying there's something more out there? But eventually I did. I left, and I knew I had this feeling where my future wasn't there, but I didn't know yet where it would take me. So I pushed the pause button and said, okay, let's actually sit. You've been running 100 miles an hour for what, 2 decades at this point. Push the pause button and sit, which was very, very uncomfortable to go from, and I don't know if either of you have experienced this, to go from the hustle of a corporate career where every single day you wake up, your phone is full of Slack messages and texts and emails and all these things. Your day is full of meetings. People want you, they need you for different things. And then your evening is also full of all of those things. To go from that to nothing, it was like going to a rock concert and then you leave the arena and your ears are just ringing because you're like, wow, there was all this noise and clamor and now it's just quiet. So that was very unnerving. And it took a while for me to kind of recalibrate as a human. I think I say it took me 3 months to kind of get my sleep sorted, get everything feeling like back to normal. And that was when I could start actually thinking about what I wanted to do next. And it wasn't, this is where we'll talk about purpose. I went down kind of a YouTube hole during this time because it was the middle of COVID. So there wasn't a lot to do out in the world. So I was thinking about this notion of purpose and happiness, and I was watching videos and listening to podcasts and doing all these things. And I kept having this thought of like, if I create the right scenario, then I will find my purpose. Like if I do the right thing, if I go to the right place, it's going to be there for me. So I did things like I went to the Grand Canyon, I hiked down into the canyon and back up out of the canyon. I drove the whole coast of California almost by myself and stopped along the way and like stared at the ocean. I just sat there and looked at the ocean. I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat because I had seen people talking about like it was this life-changing moment where I went to this place and sat in silence for 10 days and then it came to me. It's like, if I do enough of this stuff, this will happen. This will be really good. And it just kept not happening. I kept trying to create this perfect environment and it just wasn't clicking. I thought it would be a moment where I would have this wonderful idea in my head and I would say, oh, that's it. Now I can go do the thing. Like the questions are answered, things are sorted, now I can go. And I was kind of frustrated because I'm, a little bit type A, like to achieve things, like to check stuff off my to-do list. And it was like this big thing that I couldn't engineer a solution for. But eventually what I realized was I shouldn't be looking for one thing. It wasn't going to be this crystal clear answer. Instead, it was a mix of things that I learned about myself. If I had to go deep into this introspection, really get clear on my values, get clear on what I wanted my life to be like, how I wanted to make an impact, and put all of those things together. And then as I shaped it, that was where the purpose was going to come from. It wasn't going to be this external thing. So now, and I've been writing about it this week, now as I think about purpose, and as I talk to people about purpose, I describe it as one of two things. So I've got two images that I'll share with you. The first is of building a recipe. So if you think of flour and water and salt and eggs, right? You have all these basic ingredients, which are the things that are like your values and your strengths and your passions and your skills. You put them all on your table. You could make bread with that. You could make a cake with that. You could make pasta. You could do all sorts of things with these ingredients, but they all kind of stem from these same core tenets of who you are. So that's one image, is you can bake things with your ingredients, and those are all your purpose because they're all coming from these core ingredients that make you up. And the other one is of stones. So you have these stones that represent those same types of things. And you put them into a kaleidoscope. And as you turn the kaleidoscope, you get these different images that come out the other side. And occasionally you can take a stone out and put another stone in. You know, we're humans, we're not completely static. But all of these different images can be your purpose because they're all made of the things that you are. They just look a little different, or you tweak it and all of a sudden you have this new beautiful picture that you can look at and emulate. So now when I think about purpose, that's how I think about it, and that's how I talk about it, because it's incredibly overwhelming to go out and look across the world for the one thing you're supposed to do. But if you say, let me look inside and figure out what my ingredients are, what my stones are, and then put them together, and there are hundreds of possibilities, that just feels to me so much, not simpler, but just not this big overarching cinematic thing that you have to engineer the perfect scenario to even hope to find it.
Yeah.
It feels
Well,
like
it's so
anyone.
beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that story, because as I walk through that journey with you, when people are struggling with their purpose, the more they struggle, the more they look, and the more they look, it's an external experience through comparing other people. Like, oh, maybe that's my purpose. Maybe that's my purpose. Like the YouTube rabbit hole you went down. So you start collecting all these things, and it's like nothing's in your own kaleidoscope. They're all external. So your kaleidoscope's kind of empty until you kind of really, the answers are already within. And I find it fascinating when you do like a silent retreat or something like that, because the busyness of life keeps us away from our true self. But if you're doing nothing but looking just at your purpose, then you can't find it either. So there's like a balance in the middle. So doing like quieting your mind, it allows you to get creative and thoughtful, but experiencing life and taking steps forward is how you'll find it. So I don't know. Second you saw that, you shared that kaleidoscope experience, I imagine a person having like creative space in their head to think like, I could find this. And then they slowly start admiring the stones they put in their kaleidoscope. And that's the experiencing life to make that happen. And I don't know, you shared your story so beautiful. I was step by step with you.
Well, thank you so much. That's such an interesting point too, because if you're too quiet, you're in an echo chamber. If it's too loud, you can't think. So you do truly have to find that cycle in the middle where you're quiet enough to hear and pay attention.
Yeah.
But not, not enough to really distract you all the time. So you have to really go around and around in that loop.
It's so true. And then the other thing that's so nice is that it's the same ingredients of who you are, but from different angles. Like, you want to be the same self in all the scenarios you're in, like with your friends, with your work, with your parent. But it literally is like turning it's a beautiful you with the same you, but just from a different lens. So I love that. And I'd love to know a little bit more. So the work you do, like tell us more about the work you do and how you help clients or readers. I know you're doing a lot of writing as well, but tell us a little bit more about the work.
Yes. So this journey, the other part of it was once I had my stones in my kaleidoscope and I started to see these pictures, it wasn't one thing. So I decided I needed to do some experimentation. And that has been a really fun journey too, because as you know, once you go out and start talking to people about something or start testing something, it changes, it evolves, it becomes its own shifted image. So the work I started at the end of this process, yes, I've been doing a lot of writing. That was one of the things I rediscovered about myself as a way to communicate with people, share ideas. But really, I've been thinking about writing as a way to help people grow. And I know a lot of people are intimidated by writing. When I tell people I write, they say, oh, I'm not a good writer. I'm not this, I'm not that. Which to me isn't important. I think of writing as a way that people can get ideas from their head into
Mhm.
something that's more tangible. So I looked back at this long journey that I went on and I said, this is amazing. And it is super impractical for most people to do the thing I did, right? Most people can't go run around in the desert or to meditation retreats for months on end. So I said, how could I give people some of this benefit without having to go through this process? So I built what I call Unlock Your Purpose, which is a storytelling product, but it starts with reflection. So I have people do that introspection in kind of bite-sized chunks. So I say, I'll ask you one question at a time. You think about it, you write back in whatever format works for you. So there's no burden of, you have to be a wonderful writer, you have to do this, you have to do that. So they do that for all the questions. And then at the end, I do my storyteller thing. I look at all of their responses. And it's almost like a therapy experience or a coaching experience or having someone who knows you well play the role of mirror back to you and say, here's a version of you. So I write a story of someone's life. Here's a version of who you are. Here's what matters to you. And it's like offering that other perspective, the things people can't see because they're too close to it. So it's like this forest and the trees situation. They can see the trees, I can see the forest. I show it to them and they say, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way. So that's a way to help people get closer to their purpose, is to show them what the stones are and say, hey, here are maybe some of the stones that go into your thing. I also do artwork. I partner with artists, so they get both a story and a visual piece at the end of the process. So I do that for purpose. I've built a version of it for career stories because, especially for people like me who have these zigzaggy careers that don't follow one specific narrative, it can be hard to look across that and say, how do I tell someone about this? How do I explain this path that I've been on in a compelling way? So we do that same type of excavation, say, okay, let's figure out what the themes are, what the stones are, and then write a story of your career that other people will understand and want to hopefully work with you because of. I'm launching a new version of this in the new year that's about love stories. So I'm very excited about that. I've tested with a few people for their wedding vows. And let me tell you, the things people say about their partners is just the most affirming work to do, because there's so much thought and care. And especially if you're working with two sides of a relationship, you get to see how much they care about each other and the reasons that they work as a couple. So stay tuned in 2024 because there will be a whole new version of how to tell a love story coming. And that's all under the bucket of Lived and Loved, which is my storytelling company. And the other thing, if I can talk about two projects, is through this exploration, I ran into someone I met years ago. We met one time for one coffee, and something I wrote resonated with her, so she reached out. And we started to have a conversation about life transitions, because clearly what I had been on was a life transition. And she had done something similar a few years ago. So we'd both been on this journey of, let's revisit how we want life to be. Let's build this new version of our life. So we're talking about this. We're like, yeah, that was kind of hard. Because when you leave your corporate world and all the structures that come with it, right? When you're in one of these environments, they kind of tell you how to look and how to talk and how to be and what your level is and all these things, right? They tell you how to spend your time. There's all of this identity stuff that happens.
Mhm.
And then when you leave and become an entrepreneur or do something else, you have to come up with all of that yourself. You have to create your own version of all of those identity factors. And we talked about it in the context of retiring. because we have people in our circles who have retired. And similar to that moment I described when all the emails and Slacks and text messages stop, that happens when you retire too. But there's almost no preparation out there for people beyond financial preparation, right? If you look at Google retirement prep, I guarantee you will get 100 pages of financial calculators and tools and things that say, here's how much money you have to have, which is super important, but only one slice of the pie, right? If you think about a life well lived, money's critical. There's no getting around that, but how you spend your time, how you feel purpose and fulfillment, how you deal with your relationships, like all of those things matter, but there's nothing out there to prepare people for it.
Well, and there are a lot of studies of how many people find depression or get depressed after retirement because so much of their worth was tied up to their schedule, like their title gave them meaning or like relationships. But for men, they might lose all their golf partners or, there's just so much like without their career, then they're left with themselves. And that's probably that extreme. So much noise to so much quiet.
Yeah. Well, even think about how we introduce ourselves. I'm a doctor, I'm a writer, I'm a lawyer. And then what if you're not that anymore? What if you stop doing that for some reason? Then again, it's who are you? It's this big question of identity. So we started to go out and build workshops to help people prepare for this transition. And one of the really interesting things that happened is we thought it would be about retirement, right? Because there's this big thing that happens at the end of your career. But people started to come and want to talk to us who would say, hey, I'm in the middle of my career. I think I'm ready for a second act, but I don't know how to get there. I know, like my story, I know something's not quite right, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to get there. So we started to talk about it as a rewire, because this thing can happen at any point. It doesn't have to be just at the end of your career as you're thinking about how you start to wind down. So a rewire, the way we talk about it is, it's an intentional rebalancing of how you invest your time and energy across all of these buckets. So if work was this giant circle and you had these little things around it that represent family, community, spirituality, whatever else is important to you, and you try to kind of shoehorn them in around work, a rewire would say, you take your same energy, your passions, your strengths, and you build a different picture where maybe all the bubbles aren't exactly the same, because probably no one's looking for that. But you choose and you say, I want work to be this big, and I want family to be this big, and I want purpose to feel like this. And that's what a rewire is. It's how do you go from A to B? Which of course is easier to put on a PowerPoint slide than it is to actually do. So the work we're doing now is, how do we help people know that they're ready for this moment, prepare for this moment, and then actually execute it and feel the community of other people who are going through it, because it can be really lonely if you're walking on this path by yourself. So that is called Compass Rewire. And we've just been testing this year. We're launching next year. We do have a website, so if people want to check it out, it's compassrewire.com. But if any of this resonates, check us out, because we'll have tools, resources. We've been doing a lot of really cool stuff with AI, where we help people write their stories in real time. They answer a few questions. We have in the background, we send it off to AI, and then they get a career legacy story or a future focused story. It's really fun stuff. So we're helping people through this thing without having to run off to the desert again for months at a time. Like, how can we make this easier for people so they can do it while living their lives, which I think is the key here.
I love it. What I do find, like when people are stuck, words matter. And to be in a position where you're helping them pull out the depth of their story, the depth of their words, and putting it together for them, they can read it like you would read a good book. And you're like, wow. And you can reflect back on yourself. And that's probably the fastest way to grab those stones for your kaleidoscope, because you're seeing yourself and you're helping to bring it to life.
There's this interesting thing that happens. So we ask people about their impact, we'll ask them about their career, and then we give them a little biography about themselves. And women especially will read it. They will often cry because they are so touched by this story. And then when we ask them about it, we say, tell us what's going on, because you're crying reading this document about yourself. And they say, this is so nice. I would never say this about myself. And we ask them if anything in there is untrue, right? Because the input came from them. But there's this moment of, you see it in real time, shifting of perspective of how they see all the things that they've done. And it is one of the most beautiful things to watch, is to see people see themselves in the way that other people see them.
Katie, thank you so much for stopping by. I love this conversation on purpose. It has been, it's very calming, by the way, to spend some time thinking about who you are, where you've been, and where you would like to go, and making sure everything is in alignment, because that's really what this is. It's putting all the parts of you in alignment. And that is such a gift that we can give to people. So thank you so much for stopping by.
It is always a pleasure to talk about purpose and to talk to both of you. So thank you so, so much for having me.
Great to meet you. Thank you again.
Revel Coach is a collaborative platform that builds leadership programs for entrepreneurs, coaches, executives, and authors. For more information, visit us at revelcoach.com and follow us on LinkedIn to never miss an update.